But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
This is HBR News number 212. Woke Gillette's Carolyn Tastad. We have a responsibility to challenge masculinity, where we reflect on the stories of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. I'm your host, Brian, and I am joined by, as always, my esteemed co-panelists. Today I have Hannah and Mike J. Mike Stevenson is still on a holiday, I believe is what they call it, in the East Coast, visiting friends. So he's in the States, but not available for the show. We'll probably see him next week. So, but nonetheless, we have a great show lined up for you guys today. So please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat as well as the comment section. On this week's HBR News show, we're going to be talking about the honks of the week from MeToo claiming comedian Chris Kattan and Martin Luther King. Apparently it comes for you even after you've died. And the strange Snapchat filter that speaks of love knowing no age, as well as the big story, which is the big story of the week. Gillette's Carolyn Tastad, who is sort of like an exec over at Procter & Gamble, on the reason why we have to challenge toxic masculinity with woke advertising. So stick around, it's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only after show. Have you ever wanted to raise a feminist? If you have, why are you watching us at Honey Badger Radio? I don't know why you're watching this, but there is an article here from todaysparent.com entitled How to Raise a Feminist, so that you can, whether you have a boy or a girl, teach your kids about treating women like victims and boys like predators. Because that's gender equality, I guess. This will be super duper cancerous, I'm fairly certain. But if you want to be a part of it anyway, then you should probably become a badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com and starting a monthly subscription. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find yourself unable to find our content because YouTube finally dropped the axe in our channels, then go to badgerfeed.com. That's badgerfeed.com. Lastly, there is still time to get tickets to the International Conference on Men's Issues, August 16th, 17th, and 18th. It's going to be a great time. Lots of great people are going to be there. You may already know lots of the prominent men's rights figures. The Honey Badgers ourselves, of course, we're the ones putting it on, will be there. Tom Golden will be there. He's the Men Are Good guy. Janice Fiamengo, Paul Elam, Sargon of Akkad, Count Dankula, Mr. Reagan, Desiree from Just Thinking Out Loud. Vernaculus will be wandering around. I mean, we have lots of people. Lots of people are going to be there. So there's still time to get tickets. Be sure to check it out over at icmi.info. So let's get into the stories today. We're going to start off with some news in brief, some smaller stories. And for that, I'm going to be handing the floor over to Mike J. So Mike J., first off, how are you? And secondly, what's going on? What's cooking?
Well, not much right now. Kind of been a slow week, kind of been a slow day.
Well, let's hear a little bit about the ghost of MeToo. I don't know. It's not dead, so I guess maybe the ghost of MeToo isn't really
It's still lurking.
Yeah, it's like, it's not just lurking. It's a fucking dark cloud over like all that is and all that was and all that will be, it seems. But anyway, yeah, so let's talk about it.
Remember the Night at the Roxbury skit? I like that skit.
I've actually never seen it.
Really?
No, never saw the skits because I didn't really watch SNL very reliably back then, and I never saw the movie Night at the Roxbury.
Yeah, well, the movie is like literally nothing to write home about at all.
Yeah,
it's like one long skit.
Yeah, exactly. They basically were trying to take one 5-minute skit and pump out an hour and a half movie based around it, and didn't really work.
They
really could have done better with that.
Yeah, they caught lightning in a bottle with Wayne's World, and they tried to make it happen again with like superstar, and there was like that one skit with those two cheerleaders or something, and then but just over and over, and nothing got that Wayne's World magic. Never happened again.
Nothing was just developed as like the Wayne's World characters were really developed characters, but I mean, you get that with Mike Myers. So that was like there wasn't anything else they were going to do that was going to work like that. That was unique.
The whole thing with these guys with the Night at the Roxbury guys, it was just two guys who think they're attractive to women and they're not. That's the whole thing. That's the joke.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah, I guess you can't really carry that for an hour and a half, 2 hours. They also did Pat. I also didn't see that. But anyway, we're getting off topic.
Pat movie, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was. But we're really off topic. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Still kind of a setup. It's to what one half of that, which is Chris Kattan. So, in his memoir, also titled "Baby, Don't Hurt Me: Stories and Scars from Saturday Night Live," Chris Kattan claims that in the late 90s he was pressured into sex with director Amy Heckerling by producer Lorne Michaels. At the time, Kattan was working on the movie A Night at the Roxbury, which Michaels was producing and Heckerling was slated to direct, though eventually only produced. Kattan claims that Heckerling, who at the time was riding the fame of her movie and TV series Clueless, which, if you remember, the mid to late 90s was huge, bluntly approached Kattan one night while on set of the movie and asked when the two were going to have sex.
Whoa.
Just like that. Quote, "I was shocked. Was she joking?" Kattan states in his memoir. In a call with Michaels the following day, Kattan claims Paramount would only produce the movie if Heckerling was directing. Michaels allegedly told Kattan that if he, quote, wanted to make sure the movie happened, then he had to keep Amy happy, and, quote, "Chris, I'm not saying you have to fuck her, but it wouldn't hurt," end quote. According to Kattan, he was also instructed not to discuss this matter with anyone else. Weeks later, at a post party, Kattan and Heckerling did eventually have sex. About the encounter, Kattan writes, quote, "The last thing I wanted was to have someone hear Lorne say career ender about me. To this day, whenever I think about that conversation with Lorne, I still feel repellingly pathetic. She thought it would be fun to have sex on Lorne's desk. I said a polite fuck no to that. So we ended up going to her office and having sex on, yep, you guessed it, the casting couch. I was attracted to Amy, but at the same time, very afraid of the power she and Lorne wielded over my career," end quote.
Well, that just goes to show that, well, first off, the casting couch, I wouldn't want to even sit on it unless it's getting like cleaned regularly. But interesting that even guys that look like Chris Kattan have to worry about sexual harassment, and apparently people will, I mean, just treat it like it's just part of the business, dude. This is a really telling that he puts it in his memoirs, but never thought that it was something that he had to bring up or felt, that he should have brought up. It's just a really interesting way that we look at, I guess, this kind of Hollywood predatory behavior towards male actors, and we don't have that same disgusting reaction, So the only thing I'll say about this is, because it's just a brief story, and of course it just shows that this kind of stuff happens in that industry in particular, because that is a very specific kind of culture with specific kinds of people, and it doesn't spare anyone, regardless of whether you're, what your gender is, how attractive you might be, whatever. It's all about, just I think I want this now. It's just a product of the culture. But what is interesting about it is that if this was written about, like, if there was a woman who wrote this in her memoirs, that person be on the cover of Time magazine for their courage and coming forward. And this Chris Kattan thing, it's just like this side note, because, oh well, that happened. And in my opinion, if people are choosing to do this kind of stuff with each other, even if they feel like there's some pressure or some obligations to do it to sort of protect their career, and they don't report it or go somewhere to try to get some help or whatever, I think that they're all kind of like they're all playing the game. It's like they know that that's like the way the game is played. But then we can't pretend as though this is like this terribly rapey, abusive environment at the same time. It's either everyone is responsible for their choices, or there are victims and we should be like trying to help them. But those victims are not allowed to wait 10 years or whatever to speak up. So I feel for him, because I don't think that he's going to get a lot of sympathy, even if he feels like that was something he found really distasteful to do. And I think it's because he's a man. So.
Well, and it does, you get a lot of feminists out there that'll say, well, this kind of thing doesn't affect men the way it affects women. Like when it happens to a woman, it causes all this. Well, apparently it does, because men generally don't admit something makes them feel pathetic. It has to be pretty bad before a guy comes out and says, yeah, that really made me feel small. And that's, for him writing about it and everything, that had to have much more of an effect on him than a lot of people will say happens to men when they're taken advantage of sexually. And this is one of those. There's people that have come out from the Saturday Night Live set and claimed that this never happened. But if they did that to a woman who came out and told her story, people would be, protesting against it. How dare you believe women? Nobody said a word about believe Chris, right? Nobody said a word about how dare you question his story, because he's a guy. You're allowed to question his story. People are allowed to doubt what he said. And it's just a very unequal, uneven reaction all around. Not just that people don't care that it does happen, but all of the reasons why people don't care that it does happen, and all of the reasons why people are allowed to not care in comparison to how they care when it happens to a woman. And yeah, the casting couch, a lot of it is related to people accepting this is just the way things are and not doing anything about it. But at the other end of it, when there is a predatory act, when there is somebody who really doesn't see an option, I can't say no, because if I say no, that'll be the end of my career. And if it's a guy, that person faces repercussions. If the predator is a guy, that person faces repercussions, even if the other person, even if the person that he's preying on had some choice in the matter. If the predator is a woman, people are offended if the victim talks about it. And I mean, that's got to change. You can't have a situation where something is considered predatory only when a man does it, and only when it's done to a woman. Because when women are allowed to do these things, and they're considered predatory and they are harmful to people, but women are still allowed to do them, especially to men and boys, it perpetuates a cycle. Every man or boy this is done to learns to, treat it as a normal thing. If there's anybody out there normalizing this kind of behavior, it's the folks that say, but it's okay when women do it, or it's no
Absolutely.
big deal when women do it.
Yep. And it's something that men want more often than women. In fact, I think that feminists would be more likely to blame the victim in this case of Chris Kattan and basically say, oh, well, you said you were attracted to her and maybe you really wanted this, but, and he probably, kind of did, but not in this way. Or he did until this happened and he became disgusted with her. Who knows? So.
Yep.
Anyway, so I don't know. I mean, it's just there's nothing like legal happening here, but it is really interesting to see. And Chris Kattan is God, he looks like, I don't know, he's aging badly. But anyway,
He didn't look all that bad in the 90s.
I don't know. I mean, I remember him from Undercover Brother. I think that's the only thing I ever saw him. I never knew why the guy was funny, but that's a whole other discussion. He's just a weird looking dude though. But there's more Me Too. It gets even more interesting. So guess who's been Me Too? Like the most un-Me Tooable person, maybe? I don't know. Mike, if you could tell us a little bit about MLK, apparently.
Oh yeah, I think I might have even joked about this a couple of months ago.
I think we have joked about this actually.
When's the hit piece on MLK coming out? When are we gonna find out that he slapped someone on the ass in the 40s or something weird?
Yeah.
So David Garrow.
Real quick, Chris Kattan, here's the thing. He looks like a shaved garden gnome. Like if you shaved one. That's what he looks like. Okay, but go ahead. Sorry. David Garrow.
Hate on Chris, man.
I'm not hating on him. I'm not. But he looks like a shaved garden gnome. Okay, but go ahead.
David Garrow, the guy you're looking at right now, I do believe, winner of Pulitzer Prize for an autobiography about Martin Luther King Jr., claims to have unearthed some classified FBI documents. When I say unearthed, I mean basically finally got around to sorting through them. These are all publicly available, but there are thousands of them. Have unearthed FBI documents that paints Martin Luther King in a seedier light.
I mean, that's only if you didn't already know that Martin Luther King was a serial adulterer. I mean, he was a pimp, and banged
King
a lot
was
of
definitely
chicks,
a womanizer. He did definitely cheat on his wife, and these are known quantities. This is something that history has noted and then kind of moved on from. But if what's been discovered is true, it makes that seem completely tame by comparison. Through a series of wiretaps, bugs, and informants, the FBI's favorite methods of gaining information, the FBI compiled memos concerning King and the company he kept. King allegedly joked crudely and sexually, especially concerning women, with his friends. Official FBI documents claim that he would, quote, participate in sex orgies where, quote, acts of degeneracy and depravity would occur. Oh my. And most shockingly is King is alleged to have looked on, laughed, and offered advice while a friend who was also a Baptist minister raped a woman who was a member of the congregation. Now, while the archive of these written memoirs are it's all available. You can go look up all of these memos. The original surveillance tapes, however, do remain sealed by a judge's order until 2027. So, looks like we're waiting about 8 years before we can actually confirm any of this for ourselves.
I love that they release it when it can't actually be confirmed. I mean, not that saying the archive is fake or anything, but we don't have a way of knowing if everything this guy says he found in the archive is actually on the tapes. And I would want to see that part of the archive that is supposedly from that tape, because with the way rape is described in today's society, with the current definition, I'm curious as to whether what happened is something that would have been considered rape back then.
Yeah.
Because I think if it would have been against the law back then, there would have been a case made, because they were trying to shut him down. Right.
Absolutely.
And if they had
FBI was no friend of him.
No,
right.
If they knew that all they had to do was accuse him of rape or being an accomplice or sexual assault or whatever, they would have done that. Absolutely.
Yeah, if they'd had him as an accomplice to a rape, particularly if he was participating in that way and offering advice and stuff, that would have ended things right there. So I have my serious doubts as to what is actually on that surveillance tape. That said, the most interesting thing to me about this is it proves something that nobody's going to admit, and that is people can have very disapprovable backgrounds. People can have things in their character that are serious flaws or that would be perceived as serious flaws by the rest of the public. Because we hear about stuff like this, and in 2019, people can come out and say, yeah, we're poly, we or we have an open relationship and this or that, and it's a lot of times it's acceptable, at least to their own community, where you can say, well, we don't we don't run our house that way, and people will accept that a couple accepts that infidelity is not infidelity. What is infidelity in the eyes of the conservative would not necessarily be in the eyes of the liberal that views polyamorous relationship or an open relationship is perfectly acceptable. But so through a modern eye, history kind of looks different than it would at the time, and certainly nobody will ever know if that was the case with their family, and nobody will ever be able to confirm that because how would you? It's not something that was talked about back then. It's certainly not something their friends and family would have accepted back then, much less the greater community. So if that was the case, they wouldn't say so. And it could be that it was just flat out infidelity. But does it detract from the greatness of what he did for the world? Because he freed two groups of people. He freed the black people who were still sort of trapped in a situation of their civil rights not being recognized. And he freed people who were trapped in a condition of prejudice against black people by making it impossible for them to ignore the evidence that that prejudice was stupid. And there isn't anything bigger I can think of right now that anybody did individually during the 20th century than free that many people, and from that scope of psychological and social imprisonment. And no matter like the guy could be the worst philanderer on the planet, and it wouldn't detract from that. That would still be something great. And unfortunately, in our society right now, we have this idiotic idea that if an individual who did something great also did something we disapprove of, that we have to forget all of the great things that individual did and focus on what we disapprove. And we're seeing that with people on the left tearing down the forefathers of the United States for having been on the wrong side of the debate over slavery.
Mhm.
And they were wrong. They were wrong to have slaves. They were wrong to think that was okay. They were wrong to think of black people as being less human than white people. That was very wrong. And they were still not wrong in creating this country. They were still not wrong in maintaining a free nation. And they had to learn that you can't be free if some of the people in your nation aren't. That our nation went through some serious shit, some serious growing pains, and it is just sad that we have to look back and say, well, we can't acknowledge what was great in our history because we had such terrible growing pains, and because our society's stupidity is uniquely bad. In other nations that are older than us, they used to punish criminals by cutting off body parts. And the worst one I could think of is drawing and quartering is pretty bad. I mean, they would literally tie you to 4 different horses and send them off in 4 different directions so it would tear you apart. You look at the ancient torture devices that were used during the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition. You look at many different things. Our human history is very barbaric and bloody, with a great deal of evil in it. And out of that has grown civilization after civilization that each time has things about it that are better than the last. And I think this story is sort of a good crystallized example of why we should not forget the great things that great people have done just because there is something that they have done that we disapprove or something that they have done that is wrong.
Yeah. So first, I just want to address we knew that he was a poon hound, right? We knew that. I seriously doubt that he had to do anything like say, sketchy or coercive to take advantage of women because he's Martin Luther King. He probably was just like had women were throwing themselves at him most likely. But that I would still ask for evidence that there would even, that anything like say sketchy or took place, for one. As far as these allegations that he had looked on, laughed, and offered advice while a friend raped a woman, I seriously would need to see more than just have somebody say, yeah, allegedly this happened. That means nothing to me. Aside from the fact that it's been fucking 50, 60 years since, he was even around. So we couldn't even we're just way past the statute of limitations. But this brings about something else interesting. When we find out about like Hannah said, some of the great people from our history, it should be a no-brainer that no one is perfect and that we all have dark parts of ourselves or things that we've done or even things that we feel that exist. And to look back on history with a modern lens in this hindsight way of sort of judging people, it's just really unwise thing to do. And but what I'm wondering, because this doesn't stop a lot of people, a lot of leftists from looking at things they look at figures like Christopher Columbus and they say, oh, here's all the terrible stuff Christopher Columbus did, so therefore we shouldn't celebrate any of the useful things or good things that he may have done, and he shouldn't have a day and all of this. Or here is some stuff that the founding fathers did, or here is some stuff that Winston Churchill believed and did that we don't like, or whatever. And you can go on and on. Are they going to do that with Martin Luther King now that this has happened? Because this really puts it to the test. Do you, and I personally don't think you should do it no matter who it is. We should only, essentially, we should look at deeds and not necessarily people. Einstein was, also kind of a hound dog as well, right? But that
Very
doesn't,
much so.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that the things that he did that are good have no meaning. But you see, this is the way that leftists often operate. They look at history, they judge it in a modern lens, and they say these historical figures do not deserve any credit. And it's all because they essentially hate what they stand for. It's not even about what they did. That's just an excuse. So will they do this with Martin Luther King? So the question is, does the fact that he's a black man that was a civil rights leader outweigh, or is that outweighed by the fact that he may have, if you look at it through the lens of feminism, intersectionality, that he may have harmed women? Does that outweigh it? And I would argue that it's only a matter of time before they do try to make the case against MLK. And they do say, well, he did good things, but he was still a man. Therefore, he used women, and he shouldn't have done that. And therefore, his ideas have less meaning. So let's look at this black feminist advocate over here instead. Let's try to redirect the credit to somebody else, right? Let's focus more on Malcolm X or whatever. Because they plain delight tearing people down, no matter where they come from, no matter what they've done. And I think that it's just a matter of how to do it with a black man, because it's a little bit harder to do that than it is with a white man, which they have been doing for decades.
That's one of the ways it could go. I could see it going a few other ways too, of just, well, this is a special case and it's not comparable to anything else, they would be saying. And the thing I would like is maybe some forced introspection could be here.
Oh, that would be amazing, but I doubt that. Like, you're talking about the version that goes along with it. Well, everybody's complicated, and some people,
maybe
people are a mixed bag and all that.
maybe this is how it feels when when we talk about the other figures in history and their problems, and maybe we shouldn't judge them through a modern day lens.
And it's almost as if people who do great things, great men and great women are actually still just human beings with whole spectrums of or spectra. I don't know how that goes.
Yeah.
But every single person, every person, great or terrible, is just a human being with a wide variety of character aspects and well-rounded. And you don't know everything about them.
Yeah.
But the things you love about them or hate about them are unchanged by the fact that they have other aspects to their character.
Well, going just in support of what I was saying, Michael Jackson did a lot of great things too, and they don't have a problem throwing him under the bus.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and it's weird. Well, we're gonna get into that a little bit later, but it's weird because there's almost more cause to defend Michael Jackson from the left, but they like I said, I don't know if it matters that much. I think that Black men in the Black community, they are no longer being served by the progressive stack. And when it comes to Black men like Martin Luther King, who are so important, or at least the very least, they're so pivotal, they're so, prominent, these prominent figures, it's just a matter of figuring out how to demonize them in such a way that it works. They did it with Gandhi too, because I remember I knew an intersectional feminist years ago, and Gandhi came up in conversation. I can't remember what the context of it was, but she dismissed him because she said he was a creepy pedophile that slept with his daughters or something, right? And I know that there was some stuff about him practicing weird shit with girls, but it's kind of inconclusive. You'd have to speculate, from that. But she was willing to throw him under the bus, and he's not a white guy. He's a man of color that was a great activist type and nonviolent type, whatever. So it's just like the common denominator seems to be men, and when it comes down to it, it's just like, okay, with white men it's easy. People do it. They do it quickly and without remorse. But when it comes to men who aren't white or who they consider to be non-white, because I think the whole discussion on what is and what isn't white is really hazy anyway, then it becomes a bit trickier, but they figure out a way to do it. Maybe it's just more subtle. Maybe they sweep it under the rug or whatever, or they just throw jabs out there just to like take them down a peg, even while still acknowledging great things that they've done. To say, oh yeah, Martin Luther King was great, but he did, he was like this, so I'm not gonna give him 100% credit. It's just it happens anyway. So,
well, and when you get into the whole thing about color, it's really kind of odd to me because of having edited photographs and realizing there are no white people and there are no Black people. Everyone is red, and we're all just darker and lighter shades of red.
Yeah.
And some of us have darker red spots. And
yeah, well,
and,
yeah, I don't like talking about the color thing because that's a whole other thing. I think it just like muddies the waters.
My mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it always blows my mind. We get caught up in that, and we get all wrapped up in skin color and whether it affects someone's humanity. And the reality is we're not any different based on that at all. And if you take the red out of images of people, the human skin in the images looks like a black and white photograph. So it just it I don't know. It just has always seemed really dumb to me for people to get up in arms over that. And all of a history where we othered each other over it, just has always seemed really dumb to me because of that.
Yeah.
But we have all this baggage and everything. And, there are probably going to be people that'll come out and say that the only reason that anybody talked about his history is because he's Black. But this isn't the case. It's because he's a man. If he was a woman and he did these things, none of it ever would have been brought up.
For sure. Okay, I got some super chats, and then we'll move on to the next bit. But let us know what you guys think about the stories of Chris Kattan as well as Martin Luther King in the comment section. So Exploding Pretty at Work gives us $5 and says, Barbershop warned us that MLK was a hoe, but we didn't listen, dude. No, I knew he was a hoe for a while. Ben, $5, says, these blatant double standards are begging for a volatile reaction. You can't keep shoving terrible labels on one side and not push someone too far. All right, thank you guys for those super chats. Feel free to send us more if you have any other comments you want to throw in there. I'm going to move on to the next story. Kind of interesting in a weird way, but really brief. Another really brief one. So, Snapchat, love has no age. If you're seeing rainbows everywhere on your social media and you're a bit confused, it's because June is Pride Month, if you didn't already know. Snapchat introduced a new filter called Love Has No Labels to promote Pride Month. However, some individuals noticed that one of the new filters, so it basically goes through and goes, love has no disability, love has no color, love has no religion, but then it ends on love has no age. By June 3rd, the Love Has No Labels filter was still on Snapchat, but the option to select age was removed. They took it off, but it was on there for a little while. I think that's a bit weird, and I thought it'd probably be good to point out, because we've seen that there's been like some moves to sort of include pedophilia in the LGBT under the acronym. And that is a topic, I assume, of large debate within the LGBT community. When I say the community, I mean the activist community, not just your average LGBT people. I think they're just living their lives. But yeah, this was a thing for like a hot minute, and now it's gone. But I think the last time I heard the LGBT label, it does have 2 P's, one for pansexual and one for pedophilia. I don't know, but Snapchat did have it on there for like a second. So I think.
Are you sure that's not the troll version, Brian?
The troll version?
Yeah, they keep 4chan always loves to keep adding random shit to the acronym.
Oh no! You're talking about the P, the other P? No, I am not kidding. I've seen it. Now, I don't think it's the official version, because I think there are people who want it to be a part of the acronym, like I said, so they use it, the extra P.
The other P is actually poly. It's not pedo. It is a 4chan joke that the other P added is pedo. That is a 4chan joke. Now, but it's not a 4chan joke that pedophiles have been trying to use the community to normalize their sexuality. They've been doing that for more than 20 years. They've been trying that for more than 20 years, and they've been consistently getting told no for more than 20 years. And
I didn't know that poly was like a sexuality. I thought there was pansexual, which
it was because it's basically about whether or not you're able to be jealous of your partner with another person. So it's actually considered a sexuality as well. Being polyamorous is considered a sexuality. Being open like a swinger is considered a sexuality. That's been under discussion for quite a while. But and I haven't been involved in activism there for a long time because of the feminist takeover of I guess the best way to put it is the alphabet soup movement or alternative sexualities movement anymore, because it used to just be gay rights movement, and everything fell under the umbrella of gay rights, and that if somebody's lifestyle is not hurting other people, they're not doing anything, they're not forcing anybody into anything, and they're not doing anything to people who can't tell them no, then you should leave them alone. And that was the basic underlying, let people just live their lives, right? Let people have their relationships, let people form their families and have their homes. And as long as they're not doing anything to you, stop harassing them for being different. That was what that was all about. And in come these feminist activists, and they start making it about in your face. We're here, we're queer, we're in your face. They start making it all about being offensive and seeing how far you can push people and seeing how far you can force people to participate in your lifestyle as
Yeah.
observers and
It's
as
it's the
and
it's the difference between saying just leave me alone and you don't have to know anything about it, and I'll keep, I'll do what I
right,
do in the privacy of my home is just that, and I just don't want you interfering. And it's moving from that to basically saying you
we're going
have
to
to,
interfere.
yeah, you have to vocally support my lifestyle as an active participant. So it's a
Right.
difference between saying just leave me alone and saying, okay, we're all gonna go out in the streets and shout, about like why I should be accepted, and you have to be a part of that. Otherwise, I'm gonna take it as not supporting me, right?
Right. And that's where pride marches went from, people being just folks in public but folks who were together with the same sex or folks who were a little different to people, parading down the street in a monokini or whatever it is, those, what Borat wore and shaking their junk in people's faces and looking as bizarre as possible and saying, look, you have to accept this too, you have to accept this too, and you have to not just accept it as in I'm not going to mess with you just because of that, but you have to invite this into your home and you have to invite this into your school and you have to shove this in your children's faces when they're kids, so that by the time they reach adulthood, they think this is the norm. And being abnormal isn't bad, right? But they make the idea of being considered abnormal a bad thing rather than deciding that to treat people as bullies when they bully someone just for being abnormal.
Yeah. It's
And
like
so
they
that's
don't
when I
want they don't
right,
like the idea that there is such a thing as normal. Instead
right.
of they want to push back against what is normal instead of simply saying, sure, it's abnormal, but that's okay, right?
So we can't celebrate uniqueness anymore because uniqueness is not allowed to be noticed.
Yeah.
And uniqueness has to be offensive in order for it to be good, right? So I walked away from that because I'm like, nope, that's not me. I'm not part of that. I'm all for saying don't be an asshole to other people because you're different from they are or they're different from you are. That I'm good with that. Don't hit people, don't kill people, don't fire them from their jobs that when they haven't done anything to anybody. But the shit that started and it really kind of started late 80s, early 90s with
Yeah.
the whole in your face thing. I just couldn't be a part of that. Well, at around that same time, you had people coming in going, well, pedophilia is a sexuality too. It's just you can't help it. It's just as normal as loving adults. And the arguments that I'm hearing from them are arguments that children can consent. They want to go through and treat sex as if it's no different than a pat on the head in terms of its effects on other people and will not deal with the argument that, well, hey, if sex is no different than a pat on the head, then all you need is a pat on the head, right? You don't need sex because it's no different from a pat on the head. So if you really are being honest with yourself about your attraction to children, then you can acknowledge that you don't need to have sex with them, right? And of course, that ends the argument right there because they are being dishonest. Um, they don't want to admit it, but they're trying to obscure the difference between behaviors that are highly intimate and have a lot of consequences and emotional baggage that goes with them versus, hey, you did a good job out there on the baseball field, sport. And this push has been around. I think since I was a teenager, and one of the things they'll do is if they find out that you were a victim as a kid, they will fight tooth and nail to try to get you on their side. Because if they can get victims to come out and say, I'm not a victim, I wasn't hurt, this was okay, or something like that, they think it lends them credibility. And so I've seen a lot of this, right? I've seen a lot of these arguments, and it is one of the few things that can kind of mess me up a little bit. I can't quite put it on the level of triggering, but I walk away from the computer sick to my stomach every time I talk to one of these people. And
Yeah.
and it's because of what they do and how they do it. It's very taxing to talk to them. But if somebody doesn't answer back, they're gaining ground, not necessarily with sensible people, but they're gaining ground with the folks who are coming out of third wave feminism with this idea that you can't criticize anybody for anything except being male and having toxic masculinity. And this idea that everything that gets called a sexuality must be accepted as a sexuality. And anytime somebody labels their interest a sexuality, it can't be considered harmful to other people except heterosexuality. And so they're coming out of it with an inability, a complete inability to deal rationally with the arguments that pedo acceptance advocates are making. And that movement is growing. And it's one of the few things in the gender issues discussion that scares and disgusts me on that level, simply because it's so sneaky. And there's a lot of sneakiness to feminism. There's a lot of sneakiness to other forms of authoritarian collectivism that where they want to take away people's rights and everything. But I haven't seen anybody be as sneaky as pedo acceptance advocates. And so it's not that they're accepted in the LGBT movement. It's that they're gaining ground.
Yeah, no, and well, like I said, this is the kind of thing that makes people suspicious. I'll play this clip. This is from an Instagram. I think this is how the story got started. This girl caught it and pointed it out on her Instagram. I think hopefully it'll play.
Okay, so Snapchat has this filter: love has no gender, sexuality, disability, religion, and age. Why is age an option? I heard pedophiles were trying to get into the LGBTQ community. But did it happen? What do you mean love has no age?
All right, that's the end of the clip. It's just really short. But like, okay, so to be fair, it could mean simply that if there's a large age gap, age difference between in a couple, like somebody who's really old and someone who's a younger adult, it could be referring to that. But it would seem that doesn't seem like a necessary thing to point out, because we've had people in relationships with large age gaps forever, and it's not generally something that's all that stigmatized unless you're talking about an older man with a younger woman. That often does become a problem, but it's mostly just like doesn't really extend beyond like, judgment towards the man. Like for example, in the case of Ann Nicole Smith, she was a much younger woman with a really old rich guy. And, there were people who speculated that she was just marrying him for the money. That's entirely possible. There were people who were also speculating that, he's just a dirty old man. Also entirely possible. But ultimately, it's their business. But I don't think that something like that is necessarily like what a love has no age message would need, especially during Pride Month. It's just really weird. I'm not going to say definitively what it was supposed to be, but it's really weird. And the fact that Snapchat removed the age off the list makes it even more strange. They could have just been doing it for PR purposes. They thought, oh shit, the optics on this are awful. Let's get rid of it. But again, this is just a little story. I thought it was really interesting. And
it does have an age though, Brian?
What?
Snapchat. In compliance with the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, they have to legally ask, you got to be older than 13 to use this.
To use Snapchat.
Yeah.
Well, 13 and up is still pretty fucking young.
It is.
It's still pretty fucking young.
I guess love has no age, but Snapchat sure does.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well,
and
oh, sorry, Hannah. Were you guys unable to hear the audio on that?
No audio. I couldn't hear the audio on that. The audience might have been able to, but
no, they should have been able to. They should have heard it.
But it didn't come through the call.
Oh, that's weird.
But in terms of age differences, I think it's perfectly acceptable, and it's something that people shouldn't. People really don't have a right to judge adults with other adults. As long as the whole thing is consensual and nobody's being coerced or forced into that position, then it's their business. And it only becomes the business of the public if somebody's committing a crime in your society. And the only other time, obviously, is if somebody is taking advantage of someone who is too young to be part of a relationship and to reasonably judge when they should refuse. And it's in their best interest to refuse to be in that kind of relationship. And that would be with underage kids. And I'm all for Romeo and Juliet laws where kids who are close to the same age, a couple of years apart, shouldn't be treated like a 50-year-old cougar going after somebody's teenage son, right? Or 50-year-old man going after somebody's teenage daughter. But at the same time, we really definitely need to recognize that underage kids shouldn't be unmonitored. And I guess that's the best way to put it. If Romeo and Juliet kids shouldn't hold the kids responsible, but why are their parents letting them get into a situation where they had that opportunity? And it's like, so I'm all for protecting kids, but I do think that really was a kind of a weird filter, even with the age limit at 13. I think it is kind of weird, and it might have been a mistake, but considering that the pedo acceptance push is kind of a progressive thing and has been for quite a long time, I really have my suspicions.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with that too. But you guys let us know what you think. Is this really just something innocent that Snapchat was putting out there? Do you think that they thought that what they were doing was progressive and then they realized they fucked up? Or I don't know. It could be any number of things. All we can do really is speculate on it. So let's look at some super chats and I'll move on to the final story, which is the big story. So Catherine Scully gives us $5 Canadian and she says, my solution to pedophilia involves lions and barbecue sauce. Now put them together. Thank you, Catherine Scully. Although I don't advocate violence against pedophiles, I think all it does is drives them underground. They need help, not a firing squad. Solomon Grundy gives us $1 and says nothing. So thank you, Solomon Grundy. You might not have been able to write a comment with that donation, so I apologize, but thanks for the donation nonetheless. Mr. Roboto gives us $2 and says it might be a attraction to small things versus children. Miss Roboto gives us another $2 and says, but clearly there are people who skew younger. I don't know what skew younger, maybe?
Skew younger.
Yeah.
I have an answer for that because of the conversations that I've had with pedo acceptance advocates and the weaseling that I've seen them go through trying to justify themselves. And one of the things that I put forth is there are people who in adulthood look childlike. Why can't you just have a relationship with somebody who looks childlike in adulthood? And that's one where they can't answer that. They sort of need to dodge it in their
Actually,
description and everything.
Yeah,
And I
feminists.
end up getting answers from them in the long run. Like eventually I end up getting answers that personality and innocence come into it for them. And that means it's not just a physical attraction to the body type. It is a pathological need for them, where they need a relationship or the semblance of a relationship with someone who is not on equal footing with them psychologically. Basically, someone who really doesn't have the psychological makeup to know when it's in their best interest to decline sexual contact with them. So it's not that simple. That's why I don't necessarily advocate, like somebody brought up lolly dolls too. And I don't think that's therapy. I think that's enabling. I don't think necessarily that dolls should be outlawed, but I don't think they should be encouraged either. And I don't think that they prevent perpetration. I don't think they affect it at all.
All right, fair point. Let us know what you guys think. I think that the discussion or the debate on pedophilia that could easily be its own show, but we're gonna move on for the sake of time. So last super chat is from James Vale, who gives us $10. Thank you, James, and writes, "Cheese has an age, Mike. Cheese, LOL. Cheese does have an age.
So does wine.
Yes, they both age. How about that? That's what must be why they pair. Okay, so let us know what you guys think about the story in the low bar, and I'm gonna move on to the last story, which is the big story of today's show. So, the executive behind the Gillette ad claims companies have a responsibility to challenge toxic masculinity. Carolyn Tastad, I hope I'm saying that right, the Procter & Gamble executive behind, quote, The Best Men Can Be, quote, that ad, The Best Men Can Be, as well as contributor to other marketing campaigns like Always's Like a Girl, believes corporate America must step up efforts to achieve gender equality. More accurately, probably gender equity, let's be real. In an interview with Quartz, she said the following, quote, "The Gillette campaign, which I am so proud of, takes on this other important conversation about modern masculinity. This campaign puts the spotlight on great men holding other men to the highest standards and really being role models for the next generation. We believe we can spark dialogue that can really motivate change." Apparently, because men are broken and the only other men can be used to fix them. And oh yeah, how about that corporate feminism? I love it when gigantic multi-million-dollar corporations want to like be woke and try to like, you know, advocate for social change, and yet feminists still believe that they're the underdogs. They're the people who are at the bottom rungs of society. They're the trash that men
No
teabag.
power.
No power
No
whatsoever.
power.
No power.
No influence.
Okay, so the reality is today, the stakeholders of all kinds, whether it's consumers, investors, or employees, they expect more from brands than just selling products. They want to know what they believe in. And that was the impetus for Gillette. They were saying, quote, "We are a brand that for many years has shaped perceptions of masculinity, and we've helped create what it means to be the best a man can get." And the shift that the brand team made is going from the best a man can get to the best a man can be. Wow. How full of yourself must you be to believe that because you sell fucking razors, that you are actually shaping men, that you actually have influence over the way men are? Can you believe the level of arrogance that you have to be able to say, oh yeah, we actually created men as they are, so now we're going to change our branding to like reshape them in a new way? That is absolutely insanely arrogant to believe that. They fucking sell razors. They don't shape men. You know what? Interestingly enough, what you don't realize is that the people who are actually having the most effect on how men turn out, especially when men turn out to be like, let's say, less than their best selves, is the fact that those men are being raised by single mothers. Are you guys going to make any ads addressing the single mother problem with your Always brand, perhaps? Hashtag like a girl. How about hashtag, be a real mom, or hashtag stay married, or hashtag pick better men, or whatever. Something to like essentially encourage women to be better mothers to their kids, so their kids are less likely to grow up violent and toxic and otherwise like ruining their lives. Can you believe it? Actually, Hannah or Mike J, if you guys want to, because this is a long story, so if you guys want to pipe in right now, you can on any particular thing.
I just love the fact that we have women out there, not just women, but women in positions of authority, women in positions of responsibility like this, who feel entitled to tell men what masculinity should be.
Yes.
And who feel entitled to tell men how masculinity should be shaped to benefit women. Like, that is just But they have no power and no influence, guys. None at all, right? No power and no influence.
No.
But they get to tell an entire gender, you have to shape your identity around
Yeah.
how it benefits our
Yes.
gender.
The proctor.
Like, can you imagine the hue and cry from feminists if men said that about women?
Yes. They're literally doing the thing that they say men are always doing to them. This is a woman, an executive at Procter & Gamble. She's probably bringing in 7 figures every year. Okay? We're talking about someone who is a member of the elite. She I don't know if she has a family, so I'm not going to presume that. But she does presume to use her power to try to change men and tell them how they should behave, and specifically because they should be moving towards gender equality. She is a powerful woman in an enormous corporation crying about gender equality. I want you to think about that for a second. Like, if you're in that position of power and you're actually asking this of regular men, just like regular guys that have to go to the fucking CVS to buy their razors, and they're getting yours because it's either that or fucking Norelco or Bic or something, and you're telling those men at the bottom that they have to change for you, and you're at the top, or at least near the top. You know? Can you imagine? That's insane. Okay, so let's go on to the next clip. On the public reaction, Tastad said, quote, "We got tremendous kudos. If you think about Generation Z, millennials under 30, those consumers expect brands not to be silent on important issues. They expect brands to take these on. And so we got very positive comments." Well, actually, Generation Z had a really great time memeing the shit out of that ad. So I don't know what you're talking about, but the Gillette ad was...
that's a bald-faced lie on her part.
Yeah,
like,
really.
I watched it on Twitter, and they got ripped to shreds. They probably got positive comments from media personalities.
Yep.
And that's probably all they paid attention to, because to these big, important, rich people, only other big, important, rich people count. The rest of us plebs don't matter.
Yep.
The other thing too is let's look at it from this perspective, and because I know this is how they're gonna spin it. This is how they're gonna try to say, well, we got such a good feedback. Like, if you go to the video right now, as of right now, looking right at it, you've got 1.4 million downvotes. Well over 2/3 of this bar is negative. But at the same time, they do have 794,000 upvotes. And they're just going to go ahead and chop off all those downvotes and say, well, almost 800,000 people liked it. So, we're doing a good thing here.
Yeah, and that's actually after you account for the fact that they've been removing comments. I think that they've been doctoring their... Because I remember that was way more downvoted when it first came out. It was way more down. It was like a ratio.
Other social media were removing comments too, because there were comments I put up about it that I had to put up twice, and there were comments I put up that were hidden. Some that were deleted and some that were hidden.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, even with the like they've been, the degree to which they've been able to try to do damage control on this video is not enough. I actually, you know what? I should have asked him, but I was going to get the eGuard Watches guy on to talk about this article. But I thought it might just, like, crowd the panel. But this is just, the gall of this woman to just defend this decision and lie. Generation Z is just having a ball making fun of this fucking commercial and your campaign. And by the way, they're not, like, by and large, most people on Generation Z that actually have, like, their own income, they're mostly buying everything through the internet. So they're probably on Dollar Shave Club or something, if they're buying razors at all. So come on. Okay, so anyway, let's continue. Well, actually, I'll read some super chats and then, because we got a couple. So thanks, guys, for the super chats. Very kind. Mitch Lopez... Oh, let's move back a little bit. Wow, I got a couple of other ones. Ben gives us $2 and says, "Hey, lady, you're a faceless corporation." No, actually, this corporation has a face. It's a pretty fucking huge face. but a face nonetheless. Yeah, so I wouldn't want to lie about her, but Ben gives us another $2 and says, and one focused on making profit at that. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that they believe that in being woke, there will come profits. And it sounds like really backwards, but the thing is that they live in such a bubble that they lie to each other so much about how well their woke advertising is doing that they just sort of follow in each other's footsteps. Like I think Budweiser did an LGBT cup or something for for Pride Month. Nobody drinks Budweiser. It tastes like piss. And then I saw something else today. It was another company that made like a rainbow. I think it was Absolute. Made a rainbow colored bottle. I mean, giant corporations virtue signaling. It's hard to say whether it's actually profitable or not. I mean, I think that they're going to make the money they're going to make anyway, but I don't think it's necessarily because of what they're doing. Although I don't.
Well, it's already become a meme.
Get woke, go broke?
No. It's already become a meme that during this month, all the companies suddenly get really gay and homosexual friendly. And
yeah.
There's one of my favorite pictures. It's of from the Spider-Man movie where William Dafoe is like, the line was like, I'm something of a scientist myself.
Yeah, I'm something.
It's like during Pride Month, I'm something of a homosexual myself.
Yeah, right.
And then they do this, and they get all the virtue signaling they can for a month, and then they fucking drop it at the end, and it's never heard from again until next year.
Yeah, or they wait until Breast Cancer Awareness Month comes around, and everything is fucking pink. I mean, it works to a degree. This is why they do it. I think it does give them a bit of a boost in sales. And unfortunately, it's like the reason why I'm a little bit black-pilled on the get woke, go broke thing, because while it does work out in some cases, I think in most cases, companies persist and they lie to themselves and they trick themselves into believing that they didn't actually just get woke and go broke. And it's just trolls. It's just, insert excuse here or whatever. So, all right. Anyway, finishing the super chats. Mitch Lopez gives us $14.99. Thank you, Mitch. You are the winner of the stream so far. He writes, they only listen to the feminist comments and blue check marks. Yes. Chris Kinzer gives us $5 and says, Gillette makes me even more resolute in my decision to continue growing my post-army beard. Just trimmers and beard oil for me. Hey, man, go for it. Mr. Roboto gives us $2 and says, too bad we don't have equal female Gillette ad. Yeah, they'll never do that. Never do that. Although I don't think they would lose that much money if they did. Never do that. Holding women accountable for stuff?
They might lose a few bucks if they had an ad encouraging women to refrain from getting pregnant by guys that aren't going to marry them and raise a family with them. That probably would put the company under. They would have so much negative feedback from that.
Yep.
They'd be right, but they'd be broke real fast.
No, yeah, they wouldn't even necessarily, like, if they approach it in the way that the original Gillette ad is done, which is kind of authoritative. It's basically saying, men, you have to do X. There's a difference between demanding that men do something or a group of people do something to improve themselves and sort of like demonstrating what a good man or a good person does. So most of the time, if you do it well, then you'll simply demonstrate good behavior and it becomes a model for other people to, sort of attach themselves to, model themselves after. But if instead you basically say men are bad and they need to be better, and then you put fucking Anna Kasparian in your ad, I think that is the worst possible way you can go about it, but I'm not sure that it's actually going to hurt your bottom line. So because I think most men, this is the thing about men too, is that they tend to put up with that shit and they just say, whatever, doesn't bother me. So, but women, they don't do so well with that. Tyler Preston gives us $2 and says, Gillette is the new Sony, a la 2016 Ghostbusters. Oof. Darth Sonic gives us, that's Darth Sonic 413, gives us $9.99 and says, first thing I hear upon popping this stream up from my notifications, piss. but just saying companies not learning from their mistakes does not invalidate get woke, go broke. No, but what the thing is that they may not go broke enough that it matters. That's what I'm saying. Because if you're selling product all over the world and you're marketing to one part of the world, and the thing is that this is the thing about the Gillette ad, okay? I know that people have been speculating that Procter & Gamble's lost some money and that Gillette's lost some money, and maybe that's true. I don't know. But here's the thing, just really quick. The reason why the Gillette ad isn't that much of a problem, or is not as much as people want it to be, and this is unfortunate, but I think it's true, for the most part, men don't really care about negative advertising that offends them, because in general, they put up with it because to them it's become kind of normal and they've tuned it out. And also they're not really the ones that are buying them, as women are the ones in charge of most purchases. So you'd have to be a woman that would see the ad, find it offensive, and decide not to buy the razor. And I don't think that there's just enough of those women that would do it. I think most of them just wouldn't care. Or they would say, well, that's not my husband, so I guess that there are men out there that need this, but my husband's not one of them, so I'm going to go buy these razors anyway. So I don't know. I'd have to wait and see maybe if another quarter passes to see if it's actually affected them. But I don't really suspect that just because they make one cringy ad that it's actually going to do as much damage as it probably should. So
I think part of the problem with women with respect to this is everybody knows assholes, right? Everybody knows people in their lives who are just absolute giant cunts, male or female. This, you run into people like, I'm sure I'm that person for quite a few people. I get blocked by them on Twitter all the time, right? So I'm sure everybody has somebody that they're like, this person really needs a personality makeover. But when women run into people of the opposite sex who are like that, for them, it's not an individual problem. It's a social problem. When men run into women who are just assholes, who are just giant cunts, it's, boy, I can't stand being around her. But they don't think of it as being a social problem, and they don't necessarily treat it as a problem that needs an authoritative response in order to deal with it. You just stop hanging out with the asshole, right? You just stop associating with, you avoid the giant cunt, you avoid the person that you can't stand. And I think that's part of the difference in this. So Gillette markets to women's tendency to feel like or presume character flaws in individual men to be a social problem that needs to be addressed from on high, with initiatives to make all men pay attention to it and all men change.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's because, in part, because women have tremendous amounts of social power, so it's helpful to know or to see problems as social problems, because then they feel like they can make a difference. Okay, so moving on to the next bit here. I was still reading okay, quote. So next quote goes as follows. We got tremendous kudos. If you think about Generation Z, millennials under 30, those consumers expect brands not to be silent on important issues. They expect brands to take these on. And so we got very positive comments. I mean, come on, not really. I mean, the role of men matters in this space, right? Men need to play an equally important role as women in eliminating bias. In eliminating bias, this woman is an exec at Procter & Gamble. She's being interviewed about her ad campaign that holds men accountable in an effort to create gender equality. She is a woman in tremendous power. She wants to remove bias while presenting an ad that is highly biased against men, but also trying to sell something to men at the same time.
So Orwellian. They're using remove bias as code for imposing our bias.
Yes, exactly. Okay, well, anyway, promoting men need to play an equally important role as women in eliminating bias, promoting equality, demonstrating positive social and cultural behavior. What? You know, all too often we talk about gender inequality as a woman's problem, but it has to be something that is an issue for all of us. It's about men and women advocating for a more equal world. Yeah, but you're asking men to men are being told to take responsibility by you. Women are simply being told they should get shit.
You're actually equal world.
You're creating a more unequal world. You're literally taking away women's responsibility and you're making it all about they should get more power. They should get more influence. They should get more gives. And you're only putting responsibility on men with the promise that you'll feel better if you give up more of your power. Like, that's what they're telling them to do, right? We're asking men to step back and women to make room for women because women are so powerful they need men to move out of their way. And that's how we'll get a more gender equal world. It's like it's terrifying. It's really fucked up. It really is.
For their more equal world. When is Gillette going to do an ad? Like, maybe Equal Pay Day would be a great time to do this ad. Advocating that employers, in order to maintain their bottom line, in order to maintain their profitability and support all of the jobs they support, that employers have a right to demand equal work for equal pay. I would love to see that ad. And they aren't gonna put it up, but yeah, a more equal world, except when women benefit from inequality.
Yeah. All right, so moving on. On P&G's efforts around gender equality and Tastad's role as, quote, this is her role, gender equality executive sponsor. They made up a position for this woman to take. Holy shit. And she's still crying for equality. They literally gave you a job based on nothing but the fact that you're a woman. Specifically a feminist. P&G picked 3 areas. Firstly, as the world's largest advertiser, we should use our voice in advertising and media to tackle bias. Second, we want to use
hold on a minute.
Okay.
That's big, okay? Because what they are saying is we are the biggest guy in the room. If we decide it's going to be this way, other people don't have the power to resist us because we are the biggest guy in the room. We're the heavy.
Yeah.
We're the one that can come along and wipe the floor with you if you say no, because we have the money. That is what they are saying. They are saying that they're going to use their financial power to coerce media into going along with what they want. And that is guided by this woman who is rich and powerful, complaining about gender inequality while in a position that was created just for her because she's a woman.
Yep. A woman who and yet the biggest advertiser in the world also has, like, they're advocating for something by which I guess no one wants to talk about. Like they're coming from a position of being the underdog still. Second, we want to use our corporate voice to tackle bias, which includes improving access to STEM education for girls or working with governments in developing countries to change legislation so women have access to work. The things we're working on are very education and economic opportunity based. Third, it's the work we're doing inside to get 50-50 representation.
So that second thing, what she just said was, we are such a big, powerful, financially empowered and financially heavy corporation that we feel capable of and entitled to manipulate the governments in other countries. We are bigger than a government.
Yep.
Gillette.
Yeah. Procter & Gamble, but yes.
Procter & Gamble has just allowed a spokesperson to tell the world that they feel entitled to override the decisions that the populations in other countries make with respect to their governments, or that the governing bodies in other countries. They're doing, like, the one thing that I have really criticized the Trump administration for is that the continuation of American warmongering. That's the one thing I've been upset about. Now, I will still criticize bad leaders in other countries, and I will still talk about conflicts going on in other countries, but I don't want us to go over there with guns. And when I hear boots on the ground, that always pisses me off, because it's not boots on the ground, it's men on the ground. There are always men in those boots, right? And when we're talking about combat positions, we're still talking about men. Women are like 14% of the military, and while all jobs in the military are not they're still military jobs, they're not in the trenches. Well, there's not trenches anymore, but they're not in direct combat like that. And I get really unhappy with the Trump administration about the idea of going in with soldiers to try to solve some of their country's conflict. What do I see Gillette doing? What do I see Procter and Gamble doing? Saying, guess what? We have the right to interfere in the operations of other countries' governments. What are you what are you telling us? You're telling us Procter and Gamble is in and of itself a government, and they feel entitled to be part of world government, influencing other countries' governments. They feel entitled to be a governing body over other people in the world. Like, that is just insane that anybody would tolerate that, and certainly not from an American company, and certainly not Americans tolerating it. What the hell are we allowing to have happen?
Yeah, absolutely. They are telling us that this is what they're doing. This is their, like, and it's also showing that the propaganda war, as it were, that started in entertainment, is now moving into advertising as well, and they're totally okay with that.
It needs to be pointed out. It needs to be pointed out to everybody that you talk to over and over again. If this comes up, anytime anybody has a conversation about this, it should be mentioned that Procter and Gamble, with this quote, this story, that Procter and Gamble has publicly admitted that they feel entitled to override other nations' governments. They feel entitled to use their big bucks to force you to do what they want. Not just you personally, not just your neighborhood, not just the stores you shop in, but the UK. They feel entitled to tell the UK how to live. They feel entitled to tell France how to live. They feel entitled to tell nations in Africa how to live.
Yep. Okay, I got a couple more super chats, and then we'll continue the rest of the article. Darth Sonic 413 gives us $4.99 and says, we need sex bots that can reproduce. Women as a group need competition, and the sex bot nanites DNA can only help the female gene pool. And then Mitch Lopez gives us $9.99 and says, just for the multiple uses of cunt. Thank you, Mitch Lopez. And I'm sure Hannah thanks you. So, moving on to the next bit here. Let me see in the PowerPoint. Back to that. What was I reading? Oh, yeah, 50-50 representation. Yeah, if you want to destroy your company, go ahead and do that. More than 47% of our managers globally are women. Wow. At the more junior levels, we are 50-50 and making very consistent progress all the way to the top of the house. In terms of our Global Leadership Council, 40% of our company leaders are women. We've been really intentional and stepping that up.
Well, it's really easy to get 50% representation in a company where you can just create new positions for the women that don't actually matter to the company. They won't fail by having 50-50 representation, because the positions that are really important to the company, they'll hire whoever does the job best, whether it's a man or a woman. And then they're basically doing the same thing that the federal government here in the United States does. When the spoil system got destroyed, we couldn't have the spoil system anymore. So instead of firing everybody every time you get a new administration, they just create new government positions to put their cronies in. It's the same thing. I mean, everything that they're doing, they're just like a government.
Yep.
I'm curious how much funding, because I'm sure companies like this always get something from the government. There's been bailouts. There's been they get like tax breaks. They get all kinds of stuff. I wonder what kind of money our government out of your pocket, the taxpayer, is spending on Procter & Gamble, funding this business that's acting like a government.
I'm sure they're getting some money. Speaking of which, French Honey Badger gives us $5 and says, this money to control policy is only possible because the governments have so much power over the people. Remove that and all P&B can do are ads.
That is true.
Okay, so next, Quartz writes, speaking about representation at different levels, women are usually underrepresented in senior executive roles. Do you feel pressure to change that? Although she is in a senior executive role, or so it appears. And what is your experience been in ascending the corporate ladder? Remember, she said that like they got over 47% of female representation in like the top positions. So is it when they go over 50%? Is that going to be unequal the other way? Are they going to have to like, you know, make up some positions for men to take or fire some women or what? Okay, Tastad's response. We think that representation of women from every angle and every vector of intersectionality, women of color, LGBTQI, people with disabilities, we're very intentional about this, and this is something our company believes in deeply. From my personal experience, I've worked for over 30 years for a company with great values. She could also be lying about this, by the way. It's possible. I also grew up in a very equal household. My dad was a farmer. My mom was a school teacher. My dad did things at home in the winter when he was not in the field, and my mom did more of it in the summer. That's just how it was. And then I went to Toronto, of course she's Canadian, to work for P&G. It was the most diverse city in the world. I always had women around me. It's the most diverse in the world. I always had women around me. That sounds really diverse, being around women all the time. In 1993, I moved to Hunt Valley, Maryland, and joined my first all-male lead team. My manager at the time said, quote, "We're so happy to have you on our team because you're going to add diversity to our team." I kind of stopped. I know I had this quizzical look on my face, and I said, "Is that because I'm Canadian?"
Fake.
Yeah, this doesn't sound real at all.
And then everybody clapped. And spaghetti fell out of her pockets.
It was only 2 weeks later when I realized he was referring to me being a woman. I didn't notice I was a woman until I went to work with all these men and one of them pointed it out. I didn't even realize it. I'm a woman? I had no idea. Okay, sure. So equality is a core value for me, and P&G has the opportunity and influence to impact it. Women are important to our business. On how male employees can contribute to these conversations about masculinity and equality within a company, Tastad mentions working in partnership with Catalyst. She says, quote, "Catalyst Men Advocating Real Change," that's MARC, program is an experimental workshop which is really about...
They named it Mark.
Yes. Oh, hi, Mark. It's an experimental workshop which is really about driving deeper understanding of privilege and power bias. In order for us to make progress, we have to understand how power and bias show up every day, and we have to know how to deal with them. So that's been one example of training that we've done so that we can have the necessary conversations and go deep enough. You've got to go deep on this stuff. You can't leave it at the surface if you want to make progress. She sounds like a true believer, though. I will say that. I don't think that she's like just some, soulless corporate shill that's just using wokeness to make money. I think she actually believes in this stuff. And if she's actually bringing people up to positions of great influence within Procter & Gamble for the same reasons, because she wants to create equality, but also bear in mind that if you're trying to make a diverse and equitable workforce, I think that another thing that people like her are going to look for are people who think like her. So if Procter & Gamble is becoming more and more full of true believers, they will destroy the company themselves from the inside.
Eventually, they'll create so many fake positions that they'll be spending a lot of money on personnel they can't afford, and then the next time there's a recession, there will be a lot of layoffs, and guess who will go first? And then guess what the company will get accused of?
Mm-hmm.
And this will be an interesting thing to watch. This Catalyst men advocating for real change. Mark, men advocating for real change, because change that doesn't go along with feminist ideals is imaginary. And all I can think of is the room's going to be so full of hot air that the fire department's going to be showing up on a regular basis because the carbon monoxide detector is going to be going off every 5 minutes.
All right, so Tastad's advice to other companies wanting to start these conversations. Yeah, if you want to destroy your own company, here's some advice about masculinity is to address the problem of bias. Quote, the bias that perpetuates a lack of progress, or the bias that becomes a narrative that becomes an excuse for not making progress. What the hell does progress mean? Progress to what? For example, there's not enough women in the pipeline. That's false. Yeah, it is false, but not for the reasons you think. So there are many things that get perpetuated through biases. The biggest issue is we have to deal with the insidiousness of that. No,
we definitely have to get more women in the pipeline. Let's get more women working in sewage.
Yes, get it in there. My biggest piece of advice to other business leaders and other companies is you must be intentional approaching conversations about masculinity and gender equality. Why is she saying conversations about masculinity and then gender equality as two separate animals? Now, I mean, I know why. Because masculinity is something that has to be torn down, while gender equality is something that has to be built up. And masculinity is an obstacle to gender equality. That's why it has to be torn down. This is why she's not saying approaching conversations about gender equality as one animal. And it seems to me that the feminists have stepped up. I mean, the toxic masculinity narrative is old. It goes back to the 60s. I've seen things about that, and it may even be older than that. But they're really bringing it back in force. Toxic masculinity has become really big in the conversation. And I think that the reason why it's being brought up is because the way in which feminists try to empower women makes it impossible for them to succeed when there are men around being themselves. So the only thing you can do is tear men down. And tearing them down directly does not result in a positive response from men or women. But if you try to turn it into a clinical issue like toxic masculinity, then men will be more likely to try to figure out the problem, and women are also going to be more likely to try to deal with this as though it is an illness. Did you guys see that they removed transgenderism from the DSM for the DSM-5, gender dysmorphia specifically, right, was taken off of that. But what's been put in is masculinity itself, as well as playing video games. I think being a gamer is now there's such a thing as a gaming disorder or game addiction or something like that. And we know that the American Psychological Association, the APA, they clearly have a problem with gender ideologues in their organization that are basically driving the conversation, directing where the resources and the research and the general direction of the organization is going. It's not really a stretch to say that this is happening all over the place for the same reasons. In order to create equality of outcome, which is what they mean when they say it, which is why they're trying to get 50-50 representation, regardless of how hard people are trying to get into the companies on merit. That tells us that they're essentially either going to, in positions in their own company or wherever they're advocating for it, that women either be forced into a place that they don't fit and they may not even want to be, by making up positions for them, or they're going to ask that men step down. And I think that that's the whole reason why there is a toxic masculinity narrative. It is to essentially tell men to stop being so good at what they do because women can't make it. And the only women that can't are the ones that take their belief systems, their dogma on board, because they're selling them victim mentality. So this is why they have to attack men, and that's how they do it. That's what conversations about masculinity means. It's about attacking men. So you must be intentional. It is approaching conversations about masculinity and gender equality has got to be aligned to your values, and you've got to believe it deeply, and that it has to be driven from the top all the way through the organization. So again, top down, this is the way feminists do everything. They believe in power structures. They believe that people at the top influence people at the bottom. And yes, there is a case to be made for that, but only if it becomes an extremely totalitarian, authoritarian structure where people at the top force people below them to essentially fall in line. And this is how they see things, because they don't believe in responsibility. They only believe in power. Everybody talks about inclusive environments and all the rest of it, but it's insufficient to talk about it. You must be very intentional in the work that you do every day to bring this to life. Whether it's in your business strategy, whether it's in a more disciplined and deliberate approach to talent management and talent systems, to driving equality-based policies and practices, and frankly, to broadening our definition of what a leader looks like. When they say broadening, they mean woman. And that's the thing about intersectionality. It always comes back to women. Intersectionality is just like creating a maze in between taking women. It's like, let's look at it without intersectionality for a second. If you take intersectionality out, feminism is about essentially raising women above men. It just is. It wants women to have more power and less responsibility. It wants men to have more responsibility and less power. Okay? That's all it wants. But on its face, that doesn't look good. So intersectionality is a way for them to essentially create a big sophisticated maze in between the line of where women are and where they want women to be, so it's not obvious what they're doing. It also helps to be intersectional because then you get to put all the other sort of like human rights causes under one umbrella of feminism. And you say, no, feminism is doing all of that. We don't need a black civil rights movement. We don't need one for Hispanics. We don't need one for Muslims. We don't need one for LGBT people. We don't need any of that because it's all under feminism. We got this, fam. Just be an intersectional feminist like us and we'll take care of you. But at the end of the day, it always comes down to women on top, because at every intersection, if there is a man and a woman in the group, the man has privilege, no matter what. So this is absolutely what it's about. Okay, so anyway, when they say...
So they're playing Connect the Thoughts.
Yes, connect the thoughts, exactly. So when they say broadening our definition of what a leader looks like, they mean women. It doesn't, like, yeah, would a Muslim woman end up being at top? It doesn't matter. It's just got to be a woman. Because too often we just default to this dated stereotype of what a leader looks like. We've got to have, and nobody has this dated stereotype but feminists. They're the only ones that think in these really simple two-dimensional ideas of stereotypes. You know what a stereotypical millionaire looks like? Fucking Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, I don't know. Like, are you gonna, like, they bring that up and they think I'm gonna think of the Monopoly Man. No, like, we know what millionaires look like. We don't have to imagine it. It's so weird. They have this cartoonish way of thinking. It drives me crazy. Because too often we just default to this dated stereotype of what a leader looks like. We've got to have targets and quotas with intentional actions underneath, and that's got to be led at the top of the company. Again, top down, all about force and power. So there's my one important word for you. Intentionality. Wow. Anyway, that was the last story, but I had to say something about it. Do you guys have any thoughts on this?
At least they're letting us know that their meddling is deliberate.
Yep.
You know, and they can't come back later and say, well, this isn't what we intended to happen, because they know what they're doing. They know it's going to be damaging to the economy. They know that it's going to victimize people when they get fired from their jobs so that a diversity hire can come in. They know that they're going to be putting women in positions where they're setting them up to fail if they're shoving a woman into a particular area of the workforce that's not where she wanted to be and isn't suited to her aptitudes and her skills. And then they're going to turn around and say, well, this wasn't what we intended to have happen when we did all these things. We're sorry. and people will forgive them because they had good intentions, but they don't. They don't have good intentions. They have social engineering intentions, and that's never good. Did I lose everybody?
I'm here.
Yeah,
I'm
Brian
sorry.
has disappeared.
No. I'm here.
Oh.
I'm here.
Thought I was gonna go on a 5-minute rant.
I was still talking, but I forgot that I had muted because I had to blow my nose.
I do that.
Yeah, I forgot that I'd done that. So anyway, what I was saying is that they just care about power because they think that through top-down influence they can actually create the world that they want in their image, and this always ends badly, but they don't care. They're utopians. This woman is not a corporate shill that's pretending to be down with the women's. She is a feminist. She was speaking the right, like she knew what she was talking about. This isn't like the meme with Steve Buscemi, hello fellow kids. It wasn't that. This woman is legit a feminist. And she probably has a lot of feminists in her organization. I mean, we saw the ad, the woman who made that ad, whose name it fails me for a second, but I do have it here on I have a record here, so I do have her name. Hold on a second, I'll tell you. It's over here somewhere, but anyway, the woman who made that ad is a super intersectional feminist, okay? So this is not it's not a simple case of this is just companies being phony. This woman she has utopian thinking. She believes in power structures. She's intersectional. She thinks that masculinity is something that needs to be fixed, and she believes that her position in a massive company like Procter & Gamble, in that position, she has a responsibility to fix the world. And I've noticed this too. Lots of these, we're talking about really rich, powerful people. A lot of really rich, powerful people, specifically people in Silicon Valley that control social media, they also have this kind of utopian vision. They also believe that they can make the world a better place by controlling people and telling them how they should think and act. So this isn't unique. And I think that it's doing it a disservice to pretend as though she's just being like phony and woke, and that Procter & Gamble doesn't actually care about what they're talking about. I actually am starting to think that they do. And that makes it worse, because that means that they're more likely to stick to it and double down than move on. The only thing that's going to shake them out of it is if they suffered some serious financial hit to the point where they have to let's say go back and I guess right the ship, as it were, before they continue on that path. So, but I believe that she's like a true believer. And this is like made plain by this interview, and I think that should be very concerning. So, because this is just the one that came out and said it, and I'm sure there's a lot of other ones that work in various industries with tremendous influence that haven't come out and said it, but they truly believe it. It seems like it's everywhere now. So, that's all I got to say about that. Mike J, Hannah, do you guys have anything else, or should we go into the after show? Okay,
I think it's about time.
Yeah,
all right, we're gonna head into.
I was gonna say.
All right, cool. So we're gonna head into the after show. We're gonna be looking at this article from Today's Parent: How to Raise a Feminist. If you guys want to be a part of that, you have to go to feedthebadger.com and become a badger yourself. So to do that, just go to feedthebadger.com and start a monthly subscription. It'll get you access to the after show. It'll get you access to our Discord. And, you'll be able to hang out with us, talk with us. There's a great community there. And you'll be able to watch videos before they go live. Alison put out a video today that most people got to watch, I think last night or this morning, really early, but I think it was last night. So as one example, Anyway, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get us out of here. Let me just look at some super chats because I do have a couple more. Darth Sonic gives us $1.99 and says, by pipeline, she means open the camps. Tyler Preston gives us $5 and says, I love how they claim that they don't hate men, yet relate everything bad in the world to masculinity. Of course they do. And Mr. Roboto gives us $5 and says, how long till air conditioners stop being sexist to females? Never. We actually did a story on that last week. So there you go. They're not even going to call it toxic anymore. They're just calling it masculinity now. So this tells you everything you need to know. All right. With that said, I'm going to get out of here. Please hit the like button, leave us a comment, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Thanks, guys, for coming on the HBR News Show, and we'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one, everybody.